doesn't come in just one shape or size. Here at All Go, we're highlighting that all bodies can find fitness. We're so excited to bring you our series Living Fat, Living Fit, and today's episode will be highlighting Shannon and Christina.
Hi, my name is Shannon Kaneshige. My pronouns are they, them, and I am a yoga educator, a sociologist, and a parent. And so today I'm going to be talking to Christina Malone. And we're going to be having a bit of a conversation. So I wanted to start by asking Christina to tell us a little bit about herself. I'm sorry, are those your pronouns?
Yes. Yeah, she, her. Yeah. Hi, my name is Christina Malone. As I said, pronouns are she, her. I am a powerlifter and body acceptance coach here in Portland, Oregon. I also work in IT as a clinical informatician in veterinary medicine. So I have a bit of a nerd side to me as well. And I am going to be chatting about powerlifting and strength sports, and chatting with Shannon about yoga and just going through some body positivity, or just whatever else comes up from that. So we'll go ahead and kick it off. How did you get started in yoga, Shannon? I'm super curious.
Yeah, so I've been practicing on and off since I was about 6. I started watching it on TV with my mom, and I just really enjoyed it. It felt good. It was something that made my body feel good and also made my mind feel, although I didn't really have the language for it at the time, calmer. But I would kind of step away from it, come back. I didn't really start teaching until about 4 years ago. And that's because I had finally been able to attend a class in person with a fat instructor. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, I can move my body. Like, I had been watching videos and TV shows for over 20 years, and no one once said, you can move your belly out of the way. And it was just like mind blowing. And after I had that experience, I just wanted to share it with people. I wanted other people to be able to have it. So that's when I started moving into the education instead of just practitioner side. And how did you get started in powerlifting?
Yeah, so kind of a bit of a wandering path towards powerlifting. I think I always have been a very strong person. So like as a kid, I was the kid that was like, let me lift all the chairs, the joke of the kids carrying all the chairs standing out of the assembly, like that was me. Just naturally, I've always been a stronger bodied and bigger bodied person. And I actually started powerlifting like very light touch the first time. I think I was probably 14 or 15 years old, when there was a trainer in the gym who was interested in working with me. And I worked with him for a couple of months and started to get this like aha moment of like, oh, I can do this. Like, this is really great. And then he moved away, unfortunately. And this is kind of pre-Instagram, pre-social media. And so just really, there wasn't a way to connect to anyone in even another fat body or just fat pot, like inclusive as a trainer. And unfortunately, the area I was in just happened to be pretty body negative. And I literally was actually chased out of the gym, and had middle-aged men kind of pulling plates off my barbell and just some pretty kind of traumatic experiences for like when you're a teenager. And so I stepped away from it for a really long time. Went into like volleyball, I trained horses, I ran marathons, and kind of found myself doing like every sport that I could do to basically like justify being in this bigger, fatter body and being like, well, look at, I know I'm big, but look at all this cool stuff I can do. And I was really using it as a defense mechanism, and had that realization maybe more than that now, because I forget with the pandemic how much time has passed. Probably about 7 or 8 years ago now, that I was really running as a punishment, not as something that I was actually enjoyable or that I actually liked doing. And so I had this moment of like, okay, I need to step back. Like, what do I actually enjoy doing? I like being strong. And then I kind of found my way from marathons into CrossFit, because, that kind of feels like a marathon. And then ran into a coach there who, while smaller bodied, was incredibly encouraging, and really encouraged me to try powerlifting with her and just to give it a shot, because she's like, you really show natural inclination to this. Just give it a try. And the rest, as they say, is history. So I've been powerlifting now for 6-7 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is, and I understand the like feeling chased out of the gym. I had that experience too. And for me, I had the exact opposite where I didn't move towards movement as like a defense mechanism. It was like, oh, I'm not allowed to be here because of my size. And so
Right.
for me, I felt like I was cheated out of the opportunity to
Mhm.
be active because people wouldn't let me. So it's strange how like, you know, I also have like always been in a larger body,
Yeah,
and it's like two completely different paths.
I
um,
know. And what you said about like no one ever giving you like permission to like move your belly to like do something, that's something that even in powerlifting I didn't really click into until maybe a few years in, and I was like, oh, I had someone that was talking to me about my particular body shape. They're like, well, your body's going to move differently than someone who's smaller bodied. So what that coaching, that motion needs to be different for a bigger body. It's not that you can't do it. It's like, oh, hey, angle your foot this way, turn your shoulders, like just change it a little bit, find the way that enables your body to do it. And it was just night and day getting coached that way.
oh, I'm so glad you had that experience.
Yeah.
That's awesome, especially from someone in a straight size body.
Yeah.
Just because without lived experience, sometimes it's hard for people to get into that headspace. But
It really is. Yeah. Yeah.
what
Absolutely.
what do you love most about being a power lifter?
It's always really tough for me to pick one thing, I feel like. But I think the thing that I love the most is that it is the first time where I'm not doing something because of my body or in spite of my body. It's like, and my body. And so it's, I'm strong and my body is big. It's not, I'm strong, but, or I'm X, this, it's not a justification for what I'm doing. It's just another attribute of me as a person in this sport. And I think it's really the first sport I've encountered where I've been able to find that kind of peaceful relationship, I think, to my body. And there's truly, we have everything from, 100-pound lifters up to 400+ pound lifters. And so there's just an immense amount of body diversity that does this sport, period. And so I think that, while it can be difficult when we talk about, weight classes and we have to weigh in before we compete. And so there's definitely some triggering things around that. But I think just that body diversity and just seeing, old bodies, young bodies, tall bodies, short bodies, big, small, and the different shapes of people within that. I think seeing that element of it is probably one of my favorite things.
It's very, very cool.
And I love to squat weight. So, there's that.
I think too, just like the sensation when I've done weight training of just, it just feels so good in the body, like beyond anything else. It's just such a wonderful sensation. And I think being able to remind yourself that like you're strong in many different ways is helpful too.
I think so. And, I've taken some yoga and some mobility classes because we joke like mobility is really important when you're a strength athlete, because to some extent, the stronger you get, you can sacrifice mobility to get there. And so I think it is really important, for strength athletes to get that focus. What's been your experience as kind of as you've come into teaching yoga? Like, what's your favorite thing about teaching? And have you taught any folks that have those kinds of like mobility restrictions and whatnot?
So most of my teaching actually focuses on folks in larger bodies and the disabled community and like people in the disability community, because I have lived experience in both realms. And like, it's wonderful when somebody just is able to practice without having to think about their size or their level of ability, and it doesn't even factor in anymore. I think when it comes to yoga in particular, the thing that I think is like the most amazing and what I love to see like my students embody is our yoga mat is kind of like a sandbox where we can play and we can figure things out. And as we learn to like take up space and treat our bodies with care and build confidence in our bodies and our abilities, we're able to take that off the mat and then apply it to other parts of our lives. So it's like the more comfortable and more confident I got practicing different variations of asana, or telling a teacher what I needed, or grabbing a prop because I knew I needed it, not because somebody else told me I should use it, the more comfortable I was asking for seatbelt extenders, the more comfortable I was, asking for not to be seated at a booth at a restaurant. And all of that really like kind of came from being able to take up space in this other environment. And then I could see how much better it made my life. And so I could apply that to places outside too. And so when I see that happen for my students, like that is probably like the number one thing that I love about teaching.
That is absolutely fantastic. I really resonate. Excuse me, I really resonate with that. One of the things that as a peer coach with body acceptance, peer coaching, that I always tell people is that I can't make the world safe for you. Like I can't make it so that you're not going to have negative experiences in your body. I can't give you that. I wish that I could. I wish I had a magic wand and I could do that. I know we all do. But what we can work on is, how do you become safe here? And the more safe and secure and calm you are here, the safer you're going to be out there. And when you encounter those situations, you'll be able to feel safer coming out of them. Like that's what I can help you do. But it's sad when you say, well, I can't fix this, but like there's almost some security in that. If you're safer here, it's just, again, you're safer asking for a seatbelt extender, about self-advocating for what you need in seating, self-advocating for what you need in like a car, like choosing the seat you choose in a car. Sometimes the front seat's not the most comfortable, just identifying those kinds of things and being able to say them out loud.
Completely. Yeah. I know I also work in like body acceptance mentorship kind of situations. And yeah, it's finding the places where you can ground yourself in who you are and what you need, and then opportunities to kind of reach a little bit further, maybe here or there. And I think movement is a great place to do that. And so you had mentioned a bit about how like it's a really diverse community, but can you talk a little bit more about like what it's like to be part of the powerlifting community?
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, everyone's experiences are going to be slightly different. For me, this is a bit of history. Like I've competed locally all the way up through like nationals level. And so I've seen quite a bit of different levels of the community in different areas of the country. And the one thing that always sticks out to me with powerlifting competitions is that everyone is cheering for everyone else, even direct competitors. When you're sitting back there waiting for your next lift to come up, like people are still cheering each other on. And, it's not this, nobody really wants anybody else to do badly so that they can win. I've never really seen that too much. And then I've been at meets where there was a 9-year-old and an 84-year-old.
Awesome.
That's just a huge diversity of ages, alone, and much less body sizes within that. And, it is interesting. I'm often the largest bodied athlete at a meet. I would say most of the time I'm probably the largest in the bodies athletes that are competing there from the women's side. And I've never felt like I couldn't be there. I didn't belong in that space. It can be difficult. Like I said, there are things about powerlifting that can be a little triggering in terms of competing, but then the day-to-day of competing, obviously of training for competing, is totally different. And I do this thing where I love to visit gyms when I travel. So pre-COVID, of course, it was much easier, but I love to rock into different gyms in different cities and just feel like, okay, what's the experience going to be like as a bigger body person in this gym? And is it going to be positive or negative? And far and away, comparing it to like normal gym experiences, far more acceptance and just kind of like, okay, well, let's do the work. Let's just do the lifts. Just as lovely. It's really nice to see. And it's not going to be every gym. And I've certainly encountered negative experiences in this as well, but I think that's just kind of part and parcel to anything. But overall, it does seem a bit more focused on, well, let's just do the work.
That's great.
Yeah.
Sounds like a wonderful thing.
Yeah. what made you want to get into going from like learning and doing yoga as an individual to wanting to teach it, and kind of that shift?
It, I think for me, it was just understanding the difference that having a fat teacher had on my practice. I think that was like a huge moment for me, was someone else with the same body type, and being able to be in a community with where other students were also like in larger bodies and had different levels of ability. And it was actually very much like what you're describing, where like people are cheering each other on and they're like, yeah, you got it. You know, like if there's a posture somebody was working on. And I realized that we needed more fat yoga teachers because like this one class, it was full all the time, but there weren't very many others like it. And I just, with everything I've done, whether it was the things that I studied when I was researching in sociology, whether it was like my social media presence, it's always been about speaking up for the person I was when I was 14. And I was going through a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And being the person that kid needed.
Yeah.
And I just kept thinking, you know, my first experience going to a yoga studio, I was literally asked if I was waiting for someone, because they figured there's no way that I would be in their class. And unfortunately, like there are a lot of studios like that. And the only way to change that is to go out there and do it. So I went to yoga teacher training so I could learn, you know, how to help people without hurting them in postures. And then I was really lucky that, you know, I was able to find community online with other fat yoga instructors and like the Accessible Yoga Association, so that I could expand to include more than just people in larger bodies, but people with differing levels of mobility and disability. And it's just really honestly about creating the community that I wish I had had access to. Because I can't go back and make life better for 14-year-old Shannon, but I can make it better for somebody else. So that's what I'm going to do.
100%. That's incredible. I've said something so similar, and I'm sure a lot of us in this kind of these spaces have, but I say the same thing when people ask like, why do I do what I do, both with like being visible on social media. You know, I've done a lot of podcast interviews. I've done a lot of like, I was on the cover of a newspaper here in Portland talking about fat powerlifting. And so it's very much can kind of put you in the crosshairs. And I'm sure, I know you've had experiences in that. I assume it's true for all of us, you know, and it's like, why bother? You know, and someone asked me that once, like, well, why do it? Like, well, because my goal in all this is to be what 15-year-old Christina needed to see at that point, when I had men literally grabbing the fat roll on the side of my body to pull me out of a squat rack because they were angry at me for being there. Like I needed someone to tell me that it was okay to be in that space, and that it was okay to be fat, and it was okay to be strong, and it was okay just to, even if you're not strong, just it's okay to be. And that's just not what I had exposure to. And so it's worth all of like the hate comments, the angry, very angry trolls that come on some of the social media stuff. I know you've seen that. It's just, that's the reason why. And it's like, if I can help one person not go through this and suffer so much and go through as much trauma around it, like that's the why, you know?
I just want to give 15-year-old Christina a hug.
It's just like a little virtual hug.
Yeah, it hurts my heart because with trolling and I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's something where I feel like for me, I'm pretty, I don't want to say I'm not bulletproof, because any amount of it can bother people at some point. But I'm really fortunate that I have a really supportive partner. I have, family that's very behind me, and I've got a good community of people here that I lift with. And so we kind of have this like safety circle almost. So I almost am like, I want to like come out, take your shots at me. If you have to do this, internet trolls, like, let's just get this out now and get through this, and hopefully just be able to make it a little bit safer for folks. It would be lovely in the future, but
yeah, I always try to remember that trolls are people who are hurting, and they are enraged that we can find happiness when they can't find happiness in their bodies. And I'm like, I hold space for that, but also you can't come here and abuse us. So like, bye.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say love or acceptance can be unconditional. Presence is not.
Exactly.
So, yeah. You mentioned like not being able to find plus size spaces and the kind of like fat positive or fat inclusive yoga stuff online. I'm super curious about like, how did you find that? Like, how did you get exposed to it?
Yeah. It came out to like actively trying to seek it out. And, because I think that pre-COVID particularly, body positivity as a concept was kind of becoming a bit more widespread as it became a bit more commercial and more, easier to access in that way.
Yes.
Which is why, like, although a lot of people will like dump on body positivity, I'm like, you know what? If it lets people find spaces where they can feel more themselves, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As long as we were able to also hopefully eventually move people through towards liberation. I think that's the end goal there. But that's a me thing. I'm a sociologist. For me, it's always about group rights, and it's always about making sure that everyone, because no one's free until we are all free. So I'm always going to come back to that. But the great thing is, like, when things went online with COVID, it became so much easier to find those spaces, because you didn't even have to have a teacher in the same city or the same state or the same country. And it became easier to find because it literally was like a hashtag or, but I think sometimes like it's easy to forget that out in the offline world, because we're able to cultivate who we see so much on our feeds and all of that. I think it can be easy to forget that not everybody has access still. So I'm all for tools like I'll go to be able to like find community in IRL, if you will. I mean, like for me too, like we're very COVID conscious in my household because my son's a cancer survivor. So I need to know if a place is encouraging masking before I go. There's always going to be a need for more inclusive spaces, whether it's through size or approach to things.
Sure.
And I think particularly when it comes to like wellness and fitness, it's hard. It's really hard because those concepts in and of themselves are, unfortunately, have become very exclusionary. And so it's, I think inclusion is the name of the game here. But it was hard to find it even in 2019, 2018, when I started going to classes. It's become, I think, a bit more accessible since then, just because a lot of people were able to practice online, and now they're going back out and opening up and expecting spaces to hold, to provide services for them. But we'll see what happens in the next few years.
For sure.
To change.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most challenging thing about being someone who is plus size in powerlifting?
I think one of the challenging parts to it is assumptions. I think that's a huge thing. I've done this where I've walked into a gym very intentionally looking like a beginner. And so not kind of giving it away that I might know a bit more than what I've led on, maybe wearing pants instead of shorts. So I don't it's just a little bit less obvious. Maybe this is something I've done before. Not to mislead people, but just to kind of test the waters to see what the assumptions are and what are people's experiences coming into it fresh. Because unlike I think yoga, probably one of the big differences here is that you can't, I mean, I have a powerlifting gym in my house. The average person doesn't do that, nor would I recommend that if you're not experienced, because lifting weights is, and not saying yoga is not inherently dangerous, but lifting, there's I think you know where I'm going with that. Just the barrier to entry for beginner level powerlifting, I think, is probably higher in terms of equipment and gear and all of that stuff. And even just basic strength training, if you want to kind of go beyond some of the basics for at home gyms. And so there is this requirement to be in a gym space, which is super triggering for a lot of people. So I won't go too far down that hole. I'll stick with the first part of the question, but maybe we can circle to that a little bit. But I think that assumption is difficult. And then on the flip side of that, as someone who has performed fairly well in powerlifting, I have state records. So, I mean, I've some of that. The second I have a down cycle, or because we always say training isn't linear. And so you're going to have up seasons and kind of good days, bad days. You're going to have points in time where you're lifting more or less. I just finished a master's degree, so I wasn't training. I was still training as much, but probably not as intense a level because I needed to create space for that. And so I think the flip side of that is once you start to achieve stuff from a numbers perspective, it can get a little bit difficult and challenging to say, okay, well, how comfortable am I really in my fat body in a gym space when I'm not at the quote unquote top of my game, coming back into that. So I think it's managing that kind of concept around assumptions, whether it's for a beginner level lifter, it's myself rocking in as a, pretty experienced lifter. And then how do we deal with that when we all have these kind of periods of non-linear progress with training? So, and then there's still a lot of fat phobia out there, and it's present in the community, it's present in the gym world. And, I would be remiss to say it's not present in powerlifting as well. And I experienced that. We all do, but I just think it is going in the right way. But absolutely just those assumptions around ability and body size are still very present.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And I mean, I've done the same thing with yoga studios pre-COVID, but walking in and just waiting to see if anybody actually offers variations in a class, or just lets me kind of flounder there, or gives me a hard time if I do my own thing because I know that particular posture doesn't work in my body. And I'm always amazed by the number of people that seem to be offended just for doing your own thing in a space,
Mm-hmm.
It's but I do think I don't know, I think tend to come back to your pick up the trail you're slightly headed down before, but about spaces themselves and how they can be triggering.
Yeah,
I mean, I know my experience with phys ed as a kid in school was not good. With my PE teachers was not good. And just walking into a new gym, even with the confidence I've built and the ability to know that I know what I'm doing, it can still be just really intimidating. How do you navigate kind of triggers in the space, or help your clients navigate those things?
Absolutely. Great question. A couple of strategies around that. I think figuring out what makes you feel comfortable. So I always tell people, think about what outfit makes you feel amazing. As much as I'd like to say that like clothing doesn't matter, we all know that there's certain things you can put on or off your body. They're going to make you feel more or less comfortable inherently. So I always say, pick something that you know you're going to feel good about. Bring headphones, be able to create that space, even if it's just putting on headphones and finding a corner, and being able to find that space. If you can, bring a friend. If you can, live stream with a friend, call somebody, have that bit of kind of self-support around it. And then have the ability, I think, to know, kind of like have a plan. So it's really tough to come into a space where you're unsure. You don't know what you're going to do. You don't know maybe what equipment's going to be there. I always encourage clients, if they're traveling, really look at those pictures online. Go and do a Google search, click on the vibe button when you're looking at pictures. Take a look around if you've got questions about what they have, so you can kind of have a game plan going into it, so that you're not feeling flustered by not knowing what you should be doing or could be doing. But I do find kind of giving yourself as many of those head starts as possible is really helpful when you're trying to come at a gym space. And then if possible, find one that is, if not, 100% body inclusive, trying to get there. And that's something that like my partner and I work through quite a bit. We have a program that we run like here in Portland called Fat Fit Fab, which is like a combination of body acceptance coaching and training in the gym, which is basically trying to help folks need a little bit more support in terms of coming into a gym space and being able to have those conversations around body acceptance or how to deal with some of these triggers. Try and find things like that if they exist in your city, or reach out, do a virtual class. Any of these things or combination can really help with that experience.
Totally makes sense. And
Yeah.
I usually recommend that if somebody wants to try an in-person studio, like check out their online presence, look at what the teachers are posting on their own pages, and because that way you get a vibe for like, is it a comfortable space? Is it a hostile space? Are they talking, or are they all kind of like very steeped in diet culture, or are they talking about like things that make sense to you? Because when you walk in and you don't know, like there's so many different directions it can go in. So it makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. Kind of like on like we'll say like a lighthearted note, like what's a moment from either you doing yoga or teaching yoga that like makes you laugh, like it's really funny or just sticks out as being just a really like a highlight moment?
I actually I have kind of like an inner ear thing where my balance is off a lot. So a lot of times when I'm teaching, like I'll literally fall over. Like when I'm teaching balance postures. And it I think at first it like was intimidating for me, because I'm like, I'm a teacher, I should be able to do what everybody else is doing. And I'm like, no, I don't have to do whatever. Other people can do things that I can't. I can do things that other people can't. And there's nothing wrong with either of those things. But I also kind of really enjoy when it happens in a weird way, because I feel like it gives my students permission to like mess up. I feel like people view yoga as something that's very like, you have to be perfectly in flow, and like, no, you can fall over. It's fine. Just get back up. Like, it's okay. You can laugh. You can have fun. It's okay. So how about in powerlifting? Have you had that experience? Like what type of things bring you joy in that space?
Oh, well, a couple of things stick out. I'll start with like the funny side of it. It's always a little funny, I think, when you miss a lift, and hopefully you're doing it in a safe way and you can like miss a lift in a good way. I had a moment where I was lifting it, and this was pre-COVID, and so I was doing a fairly heavy squat, and I had this realization that halfway up I was like, oh, I'm off balance. This isn't good. And in this moment of like, well, what are we going to do here? And for whatever reason, I'm not really sure why I decided that this was the solution to the problem. But I basically got out from under the bar, intending that it would catch the safeties, which it didn't. And the bar, of course, bounced on the ground, made this huge loud noise. And I basically Supermaned out from underneath that. It was a really good moment for me. So I thought I was going to hit the safeties. It did not. So it was a little unexpected. But it's just one of those things where, you know, the whole gym was staring at me because it was like a heavy lift and we all watch each other. It's just, so it's kind of what we do. And I basically popped up and took a bow. And, you just have to go with it, you know, because it's going to happen. You know, it's just bodies are bodies. Like, it's just, those are the funny things. And then I would say, like, highlight wise for me was probably like two moments from, like, as a competitor. I was competing in 2019 at the Oregon State Championships, and I was going to break the Oregon State record, which was 414 pounds at the time. And so it was a pretty exciting moment. I was really keyed up, and like, it was just one of those moments where I feel like everyone in the room kind of understood what, like, we were trying to do something really, you know, obviously it's cool. We're trying to do something big. Mm-hmm. And it was just like walking out onto that platform, the like waves of energy coming off that crowd. It was like people were on their feet, like cheering for each other. I'm a really focused lifter. I don't tend to like make a lot of noise coming up to the bar. Like, I really see the judge, and that's not much else until I come off that lift. And I just remember coming up out of the bottom of the squats, called it coming up out of the hole. And I remember coming up out of that and like finally seeing the crowd behind everyone. And it was just this moment of like everyone, like the energy and the cheering. And it was less for me about hitting that lift than it was just that, like, hey, I'm a fat bodied person on the platform. Like, and this just like, we're good with this. Like, that was just such a, like, that was really cool to see. So
that is amazing. Well, thank you so much for hanging out and chatting today.
Yeah, it was so nice. Yeah, it was wonderful to hear your experiences, and hopefully we can continue the conversation. And then huge thank you to Algo for putting this together. I'm really grateful for these opportunities that they're giving all of us.
So if people want to work with you, where can we find you?
Yeah, two ways to find me is on Instagram. So I'm sure it'll be tagged here, but it's csharp85. I also have a website, ChristinaMaloneCoaching.com, which has some contact information and links to other interviews or media, or you have questions, a lot of information there. How about you, Shannon? What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, I live on the gram. You can find me at Fringish, FRINGEISH. A lot of people don't know how to spell it. And the website is fringish.com. I have a video on demand library, and I do live classes and coaching as well. So yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to Algo. And I'm looking forward to watching the rest of the series.
Yeah.